In 1987, Muammar Gaddafi commanded one of the best-equipped militaries in Africa. Hundreds of Soviet tanks, MiG fighter jets, attack helicopters, and billions of dollars in oil money behind all of it. Facing him was Chad, one of the poorest countries on earth, fielding an army with no tanks, no real air force, and barely any artillery. Their primary weapon was a fleet of Toyota pickup trucks. So how did an army riding pickup trucks destroy 1/10 of Gaddafi's entire military in just 9 months? 4 years before those trucks rolled north, Libya looked unstoppable. In 1983, Libyan troops had pushed deep into northern Chad, backing rebel forces against President Hissine Habre. Gaddafi wanted the Aouzo Strip, a band of desert along the border he claimed under an old colonial-era agreement, and one rumored to hold uranium. French troops drew a line across the map at the 16th parallel, the so-called Red Line, and for 3 years, the war simply froze. Libya held the north, Chad held the south, and the desert between them went quiet. Then the ground shifted twice in 1 year. In 1986, France launched Operation Épervier, putting Mirage jets and air defenses back into Chad. And Gaddafi's own Chadian allies, the rebel coalition that gave his occupation its political cover, turned against him. Suddenly, 8,000 Libyan soldiers, 300 tanks, and dozens of combat aircraft were sitting in fortified desert bases in a country where everyone wanted them gone. And that force had a hidden flaw built into its design. The Libyans had planned to provide armor and air support, while Chadian allies did the scouting and the fighting on the ground. With those allies gone, every Libyan garrison became an isolated island in a hostile sea of sand, manned by conscripts with no personal stake in the war, run by an army Gaddafi had deliberately kept disorganized because he feared his own officers more than his enemies. Habre saw the opening. His army, the FANT, had around 10,000 fighters and a 30-year-old commander-in-chief named Hassan Jamous, a man Western officers would later compare to the great desert tacticians of World War II. France and the United States shipped in the tool that changed everything, roughly 400 Toyota pickup trucks, many fitted with Milan-guided anti-tank missiles. Each truck cost a tiny fraction of a tank. Each missile could kill one. On January 2, 1987, Jamous tested the system on the fortress town of Fada, held by a Libyan armored garrison with T-55 tanks and infantry fighting vehicles dug into the sand. The tanks were never the target Jamous feared. The tanks were the targets he wanted. His trucks swept around the base at high speed, hitting from directions the defenders had no answer for, closing faster than turrets could track. When the shooting stopped, 784 Libyan soldiers were dead. 92 tanks were burning, and 13 more had been captured intact. The Chadians reported losing 18 men and 3 trucks. And then Jamous made the one decision that changed everything. Instead of digging in, he kept his army loose, mobile, and hunting. Gaddafi recalled his reservists and poured reinforcements into Chad until 11,000 Libyan troops were in the country. In mid-March, a Libyan armored column of 1,500 men advanced to retake Fada. It never arrived. Near the wells of Bir Kora, Chadian trucks surrounded the column in open desert and tore it apart over 2 days of fighting, killing around 800 Libyan soldiers. What comes next is the part that still doesn't make sense to military historians. 3 days later, Jamous turned on Ouadi Doum, Libya's main airbase in Chad. It had a runway nearly 4 kilometers long, built by East German engineers, ringed by minefields, missile batteries, and around 5,000 defenders. Chadian crews reportedly crossed the anti-tank minefields at full speed, their light trucks racing over pressure plates designed to catch 60 tons of steel. The base fell in a single day. Panicked defenders died running through their own mines, and the wreckage of MiG fighters and radar stations passed into Chadian hands. If this story is the kind of history you never got taught in school, subscribe. This channel covers the wars, machines, and turning points the textbooks skip. By April, the occupation was collapsing. The loss of Ouadi Dome stripped away Libyan air cover, so Gaddafi ordered a general withdrawal, abandoning Faya Largeau, his main stronghold of 4 years, without a fight. Libyan jets flew back to bomb their own abandoned equipment, so Chad couldn't use it. Gaddafi went on the radio and announced that Libya had won. He celebrated. He shouldn't have. Among the prisoners taken in Chad that year was a Libyan officer named Khalifa Haftar, a name that would return to haunt Libya decades later as the warlord of its civil war. And the timing of what happened next? Almost too perfect. In August, Chadian forces stormed into the Aouzou Strip itself and took the town of Aouzou, but Libyan air power pounded them out again within 3 weeks. Habré drew the obvious conclusion. As long as Gaddafi's bombers could fly, Chad could not hold the strip. So the trucks would go kill the airfield. On September 5th, 2,000 Chadian soldiers crossed into Libya itself, guided in part by American satellite intelligence, and fell on Martin al-Sara, the main Libyan air base in the southern desert, 60 miles beyond the border. The garrison mistook the incoming dust clouds for their own reinforcements. Within hours, around 1,700 Libyan soldiers were dead, 300 were prisoners, and aircraft were burning on their own runways. A country with no air force had just destroyed one, which, looking back, was either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless, because the raid alarmed Chad's own allies. France feared Habré would push on toward an invasion of Libya, and President Mitterrand pressed him to stop. On September 11, 1987, both sides accepted a ceasefire. The accounting was brutal. By American estimates, Libya had lost 7,500 men and $1.5 billion in military equipment in 9 months, 1/10 of its entire armed forces, against roughly 1,000 Chadian dead. In 1994, the International Court of Justice ruled the Aouzou Strip belonged to Chad, and Gaddafi gave it up. Military academies still study 1987 as a warning. Chad had not outspent Libya or outgunned it. Chadian commanders had matched the right machine to the right terrain, moving faster than a heavy army could think, and the price gap made the humiliation worse. A Toyota with a missile launcher cost a few tens of thousands of dollars. The tanks it destroyed cost millions. The trucks that started this story never went away. The armed pickup that swept across northern Chad in 1987 now has a name in every conflict zone on Earth, the Technical, and it has outlived Gaddafi, his regime, and most of the tanks it once hunted. If you want more forgotten wars where the cheap machine beat the expensive one, the next video breaks down another.